Good morning. 2013 was hailed as going to be the year of the MOOC, with previously unheard of ability to reach out and engage with disadvantaged groups of would-be learners, not only in the developed world but also in developing nations. Big time. And certainly there were a lot of organizations, individuals, vested interests of different kinds, venture capital, universities, commercial enterprises and so on, interested in investing in this brave new world. And indeed, a lot of work has been done, a lot of good work has been done. As of January, there are around about 800 published MOOCs available for free around the world. And there were a lot of students interested in engaging with MOOCs. So figures have been bandied around up to 180,000 students per MOOC, although typically they seem to be in the region more of about 50,000. That's a lot of students. However, there's concerns about the completion rates, as we've heard already this morning, as you'll be aware. Less than 10% is a figure that's quoted, sometimes as little as 4%. So it depends how you look at it, really. That doesn't compare terribly well with completion rates in conventional universities. These are US figures I'm showing you, but it's similar here. If you've got a student population of 50,000 and the completion rate's 10%, then we're losing 45,000 on the way, which is not good news. On the other hand, 5,000 who perhaps wouldn't have otherwise had the opportunity to engage with higher education are getting an experience that's of value to them. So it depends how you look at it. What we seem to have discovered is that we don't really understand very well the motivation behind people who want to engage with MOOC style of learning. What we're discovering is that the usual drivers of achievement and certification, for example, don't necessarily apply. People have all kinds of complex motivations for signing up for MOOCs, or at least they are during this pioneering period. It might settle down. And on the costs front, we heard Martin Bean this morning talk about the entry cost being about £30,000 typically for a MOOC. That seems to compare broadly with experiences elsewhere. I've seen figures quoted of around $100,000 in the United States. So there's a significant upfront investment cost for institutions wanting to engage with this. And then towards the end of the year, we had Sebastian Thrun, CEO of Udacity, announcing that actually this stuff doesn't work. We've got a lousy product. We're going to have to try and do something a bit differently. I'll come back to that. What have we learned? What are the lessons coming out of all of this? I think that MOOCs are morphing into something a lot more familiar. So actually, they're not that massive. When you think about the completion rates, getting down to population of about 5,000 students as opposed to the 50,000 that started, that's not so massive. When you look at the educational profiles of students taking MOOCs, that doesn't look so open. High qualified, professional people in many cases. When you look at where they're coming from, that doesn't look so open either. And when you look at what's happening towards the end of last year, where we're seeing various new business models emerging, fees for all kinds of value-added services like enhanced support or examination, etc., that doesn't sound so open either. We're also seeing experiments such as this one at University of Canterbury in Kent, where they're embedding a MOOC into conventional undergraduate teaching, so not so online necessarily. And given the shift of Udacity away from a model more like liberal arts towards vocational and professional development, perhaps not so much like university courses either. So Udacity have set up the Open Education Alliance in collaboration with various commercial partners to fund the development of MOOCs and also to supply learners to come and study on those MOOCs. They're not alone. edX are doing the same thing, and indeed I believe FutureLearn have also announced an intention to tap into this market. So maybe not so much even a university. We're seeing moves towards registering students only after they've gone through an examination. So they're not actually on the books till they've passed an exam. We're seeing moves to accredit other providers' content, accept accreditation by third-party suppliers, moving towards some kind of position of portfolio of qualifications from a variety of providers and a variety of different sources and a variety of different places. Just as an aside, just think back to 2008, the run-up to the global economic crisis. You had a number of trusted, well-regulated, highly regulated institutions who sold well-understood products called loans and mortgages. They took those, they sold them on, they bundled them up in different ways, they sold them on to other parties who were not so well-regulated, not so quality assured, and those third parties in turn diced and sliced them up into further so-called financial derivatives, to the extent that it became difficult to see quite what you had got when you were buying one of these products, and when confidence began to slip, we know what happened. There may be some parallels here that I think we need to think about. Should we be concerned? Certainly we can't go on the way we are. The costs of higher education are outstripping the capability of a lot of people to buy into that kind of an experience. It therefore is the case, as other commentators have suggested, that MOOCs have the potential to have a disrupting effect on the rest of the sector if they can in some way cream off the lucrative markets, such as the vocational training, continuing professional development, which, as we're seeing, is the direction that some, at least, of the providers are going. This example has been cited already this morning, I think, the Georgia Tech Online Master of Science in Computer Science. It's being offered by Udacity. Okay, it's part funded by AT&T, and it's in conjunction with Georgia Tech, but it's offered by Udacity, a MOOC provider. They're charging $6,600. So that doesn't sound so open, although it's a lot cheaper than a conventional non-MOOC type course from Georgia Tech or anywhere else in the States for that matter. And it's by selection. They've registered, I think, 375 students. That doesn't sound so open either. So, as I say, I think MOOCs are morphing into something that's a lot more familiar. It's online education of a sort. And so I think we should be concerned, because I think there's some serious competition out there. But if that all sounds rather negative, I want to draw this to a close with some more positive thoughts. I think what we're seeing is that MOOCs are stimulating the development of a reconsideration of what we should be doing with online learning. It's been around a long time. It's been effective for a long time. It's not widely adopted. There are issues. We don't know how to do it perfectly yet. But I think what we're seeing is, in response to the MOOC phenomenon, a number of institutions beginning to seriously engage with the thought of how do we use this more strategically. Tony Bates reported towards the end of last year about how he'd been approached in a 6-month period by 13 different universities in Canada, asking him for advice on how they could strategize online learning within their institutions. There still remains the issue of scalability. Diana Laurillard drew our attention to this at the first MOOCs event last year. If you look at the Complete University Guide, University League Table for 2014, it will give you the staff-student ratios for all the higher education institutions in the UK. Understandably, at one end of the spectrum, they're very favourable. 1 to 10 is pretty good. I wish I enjoyed that in my own. But even when you look at the average, it's 1 to 18. I've shown this figure to other people and they've challenged it, but that's what the maths come to. But typically the feeling seems to be that the ratio is about 1 to 25. That feels a bit more like it. But even at 1 to 25, if you've got 50,000 students, you need 2,000 tutors. We just don't have that kind of resource. So we've got to find some way of tackling the scalability. CMOOCs seem to be pointing the way to a degree. So it's not that central model of the tutor, the teacher, engaging individually with all of the learners form much more of a network and support each other. As a student on a CMOOC, I must admit I personally found that experience incredibly challenging. It was exciting, but it was challenging, and I'm not convinced that I, let alone a lot of other people, have got the necessary degree of skill to be able to cope effectively in that sort of an environment. So I think CMOOCs perhaps point the way, but by no means, I think, are they the answer either. So to conclude, I think what MOOCs have demonstrated is there is a huge latent demand, and with world population growth forecast to more than double, by the year 2025, it forecast to have more than doubled over the last 75 years. So there's a huge demand out there as demonstrated by MOOCs. That demand is likely to carry on growing. MOOCs don't seem to be the magic bullet. There are issues about learner motivation we don't properly understand yet, and the business models are still evolving. We don't yet have sustainable business models, I don't think, to make this stuff work. The fact that they're morphing into more familiar products means that they are even more potentially disruptive, I think, than they could have been if they stayed as a kind of pure MOOC model. But the good news is I think they're having a really positive impact on the way we're thinking about teaching and learning in institutions, causing us to begin to undertake more of a strategic review of how we use technology in the form of online learning, and encouraging more pedagogical innovation. And I wish I had the answers as to how exactly we do this. I don't, but I think there are very encouraging signs which are suggesting that there's a lot more thought going into this now and a lot more research taking place, which will get us there in the end. Thank you.